Well, hello, hello, hello. How are you guys? Welcome to Life Discussions with Dr. Jefferson. I am Dr. Jefferson, your host here. Today we're going to talk about domestic violence. Please take note that in the ticker going across the screen as you're viewing today, of course, in addition to those wonderful ways that you can support our channel and our growth and support us, is the phone number to the domestic violence hotline. Okay. There is also a website, and I'm going to feature this website during the show at some point for you guys because you never know who needs help, when they need help, where they need help, and where they'll see it, right? And so this show might be the only way that somebody gets an opportunity to see an avenue in which they can get some help when they're in a situation that calls for such. So make sure that you guys go ahead and share this content because we're going to get into a detailed discussion today of some of the indications that intimate partner violence is an issue for people. And we're going to talk about what that looks like, and then we're also going to demythify some of the myths around this. Um, in this particular story that I'm going to talk about today, we're going to talk about um, people who are content creators and the way that we can be a little bit more sensitive to releasing stories and doing reviews on situations like this. Because I seem to, I keep getting some very disturbing content from a couple of content creators, and it's interesting to me how people can review situations where people have died in such a way. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to share this article with you guys, and I'm sure that if you have been anywhere close to the news in the last week, you definitely know about this particular case. Okay, so let me go here, pull up this story so that I can share it. How are you, Jermaine? You are a mess today. Okay. Let's see. Okay. Hopefully, you guys can see this. This article was written by Katie Couch. So, the day she was kidnapped, Yasmin Yar was getting ready to move once more in an effort to escape an abusive former partner, her family members say. Uyar, 24, had already moved several times in an attempt to evade the father of her son, 27-year-old Tyler Rios, whose family members say had been abusive for years. She had left her home in Highland Park for Rahway several months ago and was just 2 days shy of moving once more when she and her son were kidnapped. Her mother, Karen Uyar, says. Now, what I found to be really interesting about reading this is that her mother was named Karen. No shade, don't judge me. And this particular case is concerning interracial dating. And that's one of the things that I'm going to speak to about the content creator who reviewed this and some of the very questioning whether I should even mention her. But some of the rather disturbing comments that was made by that content creator who released this information earlier today. Okay. So it says, we are eternally grateful. The outpouring of love and support we've got has been amazing. Karen Newyar said at a press conference on Monday afternoon. Rios is currently charged with kidnapping in relation to Sebastian Rios, and more charges are expected to be filed. The Union County Prosecutor's Office said on Sunday requests for additional details were not returned on Monday. So Rios had a first appearance in Putnam County Court in Tennessee Monday morning. A court official told New Jersey Advanced Media he currently faces felony fugitive charges in Tennessee. Although those charges will be dropped upon his extradition to New Jersey. Okay. He is expected to be extradited within the next 10 days, the official said. Sebastian was found safe on Saturday morning, Karen Uyar said, and came home to New Jersey on Sunday. The 2-year old, who turns 3 in August, is not in any kind of distress and doesn't fully understand what happened. Um, and I'm going to talk about this too, because oftentimes people misconstrue the fact that children are silent with children are doing all right. Okay. Attachment solidifies at age 2 in children at the latest. And there are several attachment disturbances and traumas in this child's life over the course of their entire life, considering the relationship of the parents. So it says he was very quiet when I picked him up, as if that's not an indication of trauma, in Tennessee. He had a rough couple of days, she said, adding that the toddler hadn't had eaten an entire box of breakfast sausages upon his return home. Yasmin Uyar was found dead several hours after Rios was arrested. Official in Tennessee said an autopsy will be performed before a body is returned to New Jersey. She said that Yasmin, who the family calls Yazzie, had been trapped in the cycle of abuse for years and had attempted to leave a number of times. She was almost strong enough to leave but couldn't, and at this point of her life she was finally strong enough to leave to raise Sebastian and try to have the best life she could have. So it says Yasmin was a doting mother who had suffered from postpartum distress, which is depression, and insomnia following his birth. Her mom is saying all of these things. He truly was her best friend. She went nowhere without him. Karen later added, I can't get past her mom's name is Karen, and that there is an association in the Black community for all of these things, right? Because I'm gonna get to all of this, okay? The relationship had always been tumultuous, but became increasingly violent, she said. Yasmin Uyar had a restraining order against Rios after an assault in which he allegedly slammed her head into a wall. Uyar thanked the local and state police departments and FBI for their help, noting the history of domestic violence was long and a frustrating cycle. What was going to happen was God's plan, and it happened. I don't believe anything else could have been done. I want Yazzy's voice to be heard as a strong voice. Just because you're a victim of domestic violence doesn't mean you're weak. Now, I'm going to point out that her mother did say that she wasn't strong enough to leave while being a victim. And then she goes to redact those words by saying this. Says, I want the world to remember Yazzie as being a person who tried to fight for herself. She didn't always win, but at the end had really started to fight for herself. Okay. So that's the one article. All right. So I'm going to stop it. I'm going to go to the other one. Just follow me now. We're going somewhere. Hey, Joy, what's going on? This one is a little bit different, okay? A little bit different, more detailed, and less mom. Okay, let's see. So if we go here, can you guys see this? Yeah, no, maybe so. Hold on, I can't make my wonderful feed do what it needs to do. Oh, I gotta stop and probably reshare. Mm-mm-mm. Okay. Now maybe I can put it back through. Of course. Because I want you guys to see from the beginning. Hey, AAS, how are you? Okay, one second. I'm going to reshare it. Don't worry. I got this going. We're going to do this. We're going to get it right today. Now, is it working? Maybe. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. This is a young lady. So let's see, because let me, while you guys are catching up and looking at this, I'm going to post up these questions really quickly because, yes, yes, we are. So, my question for you guys while you guys are going through and reviewing these, I mean, looking at and listening to this feedback, is going to be how many of you have personally experienced an intimate partner violent relationship? And then how many of you have witnessed firsthand intimate partner violence, whether it's in your family, distant relative that's not necessarily in the family doing something to somebody else, or a neighbor, regular person just out at the marketplace, in the mall, etc. And I want to know what how that made you feel, the people who have witnessed it, because we're going to talk a little bit about the perceptions of the grandmother of her grandson in this particular case who witnessed potentially his mother being killed by his father. But so we're going to talk about this. Let's chat. Let's go back here. So hopefully everybody's kind of moving up a little bit. So, at this point in her life, Union County mother, we've already talked about that. Yasmin Uar, 24, was finally strong enough to leave an abusive relationship and raise her 2-year-old son on her own. Unfortunately, things didn't work out the way she planned. Um, so we talk about the relationship here. This is what's important. Says they dated on and off over the years and had a long history of domestic violence throughout the course of the relationship. Her relationship with domestic violence and Tyler is a long relationship. People need to understand that it is not always the person who goes through this, but the entire family. We as a family have been there for Yasmin throughout everything that was involved in their relationship. Karen described her daughter as a great mom, of course, because she's deceased. She suffered from postpartum depression after she had Sebastian and suffered from horrible insomnia, but she was so thrilled to have Sebastian. He truly was her best friend. So she speaks to that again. Let me just jump down here. Okay. Right here says as a part of her recapturing her life, Yasmin moved to Rahway about 4 or 5 months ago for the sole purpose of distancing herself from Rios. That's the boyfriend, Tyler. However, says she was about to move on Friday again because he found out where she lived. That same day, Sebastian didn't show up for daycare, and Yasmin did not arrive for work. An Amber Alert was issued. Says her body was found Saturday in Tennessee. Her ex, Tyler Rios, 27, of Highland Park, is charged with first degree kidnapping in connection with the alleged abduction of 2-year-old Sebastian Rios, and additional criminal charges are pending in connection with the death of Uyar. So, the first thing that we look at, this, just follow me a bit here, okay? So, when a body is found and the details of the mom's last interactions with the son and the son's last interactions having been with the mom, and there is a current restraining order against the father, typically the first charges would not be just kidnapping charges against this kid. It'd be some type of murder charges against him for the body of mom being found. However, apparently, during, after the Amber Alert was issued, the police officers found the child and they didn't know at the time that the mother was deceased. Apparently, after he was in custody, there was information rendered from him being questioned that led them to finding mom. So that was the first question that, people were asking about, and I wanted to kind of clarify that one. Okay. Here it says Sebastian was picked up by his family, and his grandmother, Karen, said he's doing really well. So this just goes back to the same things that we talked about, right? Now, this is what's interesting to me. Okay. For those of you who has who have seen intimate partner violence cycles, I want you to type a 1 in the chat, okay? Let me know what you know about the cycle of intimate partner violence, not domestic violence where it may be between a family member or something like that, but intimate partner violence, which is quite different. Okay. Hold on, let me look at your comments. Two friends murdered, mothers of two friends murdered, one friend's brother murdered. Mm. And AAS, how did that make you feel? Hey, Stranger Talk Live, what's going on? Mm. It's hard. It's hard. So when we talk about the cycle of abuse, okay, there are some things that people, you know, oftentimes ask me, as far as like what can we do? Like what does it look like? How do we get to that? And the first thing that I talk about is emotional distress management. Everything starts here. Everything starts here. So the cycle of abuse is a very complicated one for a couple of reasons. When people are trapped in this cycle, they're in a whole relationship. An intimate partner relationship is a place where people share secrets. So they don't only share secrets that pertain to the relationship, they also share other secrets that don't necessarily pertain to the relationship in this operation, but also to their communication pattern and the way that discord is resolved in their relationship or not. So, what I want to say is this: when you see something, you have to say something. Not necessarily say something to those people, but also say something to the authorities, especially when there are kids involved. So, this mother of now this child who is an orphan apparently saw her daughter in distress and going through a very difficult time in a relationship with someone that she was intimate with, right? She mentioned that her daughter didn't have the strength to leave this young man several times, but she observed the violence over the course of this relationship. So there are several things that you can do. And I think that we as people in America have like this mindset that says that we should stay out of people's personal affairs whenever there's accountability to be had on our part. I'm just going to say what that is. The other component is that the bigger issue here, the larger issue here, as you guys heard me reading, is this. This young man obviously comes from a cycle of abuse. Hurt people, and that's what we know. Oftentimes, when we are not taught how to properly resolve conflict by way of accurate modeling behavior, and I hate the term fathers in the home, but essentially environment has a huge component to do with how we resolve conflict as well. So if we're not taught adequate coping skills or how to resolve conflict skills, right, we typically use hostility because fight or flight means fight. Aggression is our natural response to feeling threatened in relationships, even if that's emotional threatened, right? So if we feel emotionally threatened and we respond with verbal or physical aggression against another person, it's just as bad, you know what I'm saying, as us responding to a stranger on the street and then ending up hurting them to the detriment of murdering them. That's how bad it is emotionally. The scars are emotionally when you're in an abusive cycle with an intimate partner. I have to stress the importance of teaching your kids adequate conflict resolution skills. And we have ample opportunity to start teaching these things. Kids go to school, they're bullied every day. Bullying is a part of life, it's a part of the cycle that has been in existence since people have been in existence, okay? Even animals that are not human beings do it. It's really interesting. Really interesting. So, human beings are considered to be more evolved than other animals, right? So that means that we're supposed to be people that recognize that there are issues. And as a result of us recognizing that there are issues, we do things that help us and the people that we care about or we notice in society are here with us keep themselves safe so they can stay alive. Okay. So Stranger Talk says hurt people hurt people. The hurt has to be channeled so that the outward action doesn't ever hurt you or anyone else. I agree. And here's the thing. If we don't identify that there is an issue, we can't resolve the issue. So it starts with the people who are connected to us, not necessarily just us, right? So the people who are observing our interactions with other people, the people who are a part of our interconnected network of friends, people who are a part of our interconnected network of family members, the people who see us in schools, the people who see us at work, the people who see us at play, at the bars, etc. Okay? So let's talk about substance use and how it increases the risk for domestic violent situations, not just for intimate partner situations, but also for family violence. So, family members or friends. So, if we are in relationships with people, if we're connected with people, that's what relationships are, connectivity to others, okay? And so, if we're connected to other people, and we have substances and we use substance as a means to manage our distress, what I just talked about, right? So you get highly stressed out, work's just not going the way you want it to go, your relationship at home is just not going the way you want it to go, and you know what, there is a bar. We got a lot of bars, we got a lot of ABC stores. What we don't have is enough therapy centers on the corners, okay? But that's a whole nother story, right? I feel like we have to destigmatize what it looks like for people to get mentally and emotionally fit and healthy. But we don't have to do that when it comes to people going to the liquor stores. It's okay for us to put the liquor stores up and that be prevalent, right? Put the bars up. And that be a prevalent centralized theme in society as to how to gauge these issues. Drown it out with a bottle. Or, you know what, let's smoke some weed, get high. So when you are under the influence, I talked about this in my discussions about rape culture. When you're under the influence, you have an altered mental state. So you're not yourself. So even if your normal self is pretty well balanced and you're a person who typically doesn't engage in hostility, who doesn't abuse people, who don't, go out and just like look for mean things to say or get look for difficult or challenging situations to get in and end up fighting with people. Even if you're not a person that does these types of things on a consistent basis, when you decide to use substances to drown out your sorrows instead of having a conversation or reaching out to supportive people, you end up making victims out of the people around you who care for you. So let's have a conversation about what victims look like. They look like you and me. So you could never look at a person and say what they have or have not gone through. I asked the question a moment ago, who had, witnessed firsthand intimate partner violence situations? And the vast majority of you had. What does that tell you? I'm pretty sure that before these situations got extremely volatile, before these situations got violent, before they became something that were, oh my God, we need our attentions on this situation right here. Before that happened, nobody could have thought, nobody would have ever guessed that this is what would have happened. As a result, these things do happen and they happen more frequently than not. So I think that more conversations need to be had around community accountability and the way that we view distress management as a whole, and then also how we view these situations. Okay. Now, I will say that we took a look at some numbers, okay, arrest reports. We looked at some statistics, and I'm going to bring this up really quickly so we can have a look see once again. Okay, let's see if I can make it big. So these are current statistics based on 2021 numbers. I'm going to go back here and replay it. But also, so Stranger Talk Live says altered state will shape that action. Balance is the key. Know your limit. Let me says if one can't, they will always suffer, and limit is the key as well. I agree, but here's the thing: if you're going to the bottle before you're going to resolve the distress, we have to look at the bigger problem then. So remember, we talked about the prison numbers of mass population when it comes to incarceration as it affects the black and the brown community. Okay, so this is the entire population index for detention facilities. And we talked about some of the things that we felt were some of the crimes that, black and brown people were arrested for. When we had this discussion, and you see the state prisons over here, right? And you see the local jails over here, this young man is now in the local jail system, okay? Whether or not he probably won't get out of jail because he's awaiting extradition. So he won't have a bond hearing at the local area. He'll have to be charged in New Jersey. But he'll remain a part of this population of people until he moves to a different population of people, just basically contingent upon what his defense looks like and all of these factors. Now, not to victim shame or anything like that, I'm going to talk to you guys about the cycle and the duration that these people were in a relationship with each other. When we looked at this chart and we talked about how many of these particular situations apply to us as black and brown people, when you see assault is down here on the violent end of crimes in the green area at the very bottom. You see this number over here? I think it was 136,000. Yep, that's right. So 136,000. was that number. Okay. Um, can we move the talking point out of the way so I can see the chart? Thank you. So if we look here at this 136,000 people who are currently in prison, these are people that have been convicted, okay, in state prisons. How many of these do you think were actually reported by us? Just the assaults, because we're under assaults, not other violent offenses that are at 42,000 down here. When you look at the local jail, right, where this guy is right now, he accounts for this, what, 34,000 people who are in the local jails. No, he's not convicted just yet. So we'll say 149,000. But he'll also be a part of this 82,000 over here because he has violated a public order, which is a restraining order. So he's accounted for in two types of these cases already. What we didn't see in any of the reports that I've seen so far, and of course this is a new case, this woman was just found recently. But the one thing that we didn't see is, where is his family? His family his family is black. This child is going to the family of the mother. And there were a couple of things that was very, I don't know, questionable about the mother's behavior. So I speak oftentimes about the way we are portrayed to the world around us, and I speak a lot about that because it's important for us to understand. It's really important for us to understand, okay? Detrimental to our being and our survival to understand that we need to be a standalone when it comes to identifying ourselves. Differentiation is necessary if we are going to survive as a race of people within a race of people. Humanity is a race in and of itself. Being black doesn't have to be a separate experience if we don't continue to perpetuate the cycles that keep us in bondage to ourselves, not to others. We have a problem when it comes to comparing our actions to the actions of other cultures of people, even other subcultures of people within our own culture. We'll look to white people and we'll say, well, you know what? It's a white person killing their baby mama. The answer is yeah. They do serial killings, they do intimate partner killings, and oftentimes, before they become serial killers, they kill the intimate partner first. Or maybe the intimate partner is a motivating factor for them to go and kill other people serially. Okay. So, what I'm saying is the comparisons, of us and our culture to other people and other cultures can definitely lead to detriment of self. I think it definitely leads to a less um, prevalent self awareness. But I am curious as to where this young boy, he's 27, right? Where is his mother? Where is his father? Where are his siblings? Where is his family in all of this? And where were they as these violent cycles were continued over the course of this relationship? I also have a lot of questions about her mom and her mom's response, right? Because the people that are connected to us, when we talk about people having a long relationship of intimate partner violence in their relationships, and they have been exposed to us and we have been exposed to them, there are certain questions that we need to ask ourselves about what we've done and what we've not done. Okay. And there are several ways that we can help. Okay. The best way for you to protect the people who you love without triggering the people they're attached to, and that means the person who is responsible for that cycle of abuse continuing. The best way is for you to help them develop an escape plan. And don't talk about it. Don't have conversations about it. Just know that there is a cycle and you've recognized what that cycle looks like. Make sure you keep them in arm's reach. You don't just push them out, on their own where they're not safe. and make sure their safety plan includes somebody that can provide for their physical safety. So you said, I'm really sad how the children are being the go to destroy as a parent. I can only do so much. Our worldwide voice has been selected by negative intent, my opinion, accountability. I do agree. I feel like in this particular case though, I feel like you have a mother and potentially a family who presents with racial undertones in the way that she presents this case to the public. And there are some things, some preconceived notions about us as a culture that I feel may have been responsible for the way that her mother tiptoed around this particular case, especially considering the fact that her name is Karen. And I don't think that we recognize how we perpetuate these cycles against us because we have decided to start name calling women and calling women Karens when they call the police. So a white woman named Karen calls the police on her black father of her grandchild. How responsive do you think a police department is going to be in amidst all of this? Because this child was born amidst all of this. I think that that's the part that oftentimes we lose sight of, the realities around how our subtle actions and the things that we don't really think into deeply can be something that leads to the detriment of another life. So, anti-Afro Svengalis says the child won't be going to the grandmother. She was aware of the violent episodes and didn't intervene. She therefore is considered non-protective. I think that by them allowing the grandmother to pick up the child and considering the history of a child of the child and attachment theory, I think that the grandmother is definitely going to end up with the child. Um, and that's a difficult one to sit with for a couple of reasons. But she is of the lesser evil, lesser known evils when it comes to attachment injuries for this child. I think that the grandmother, she definitely is going to need the services that are going to be provided for her, though, to keep the child stable. But here's the real. This is where things get really complicated. Okay, this young man is of our community, and there is a high degree of accountability we have to take for his actions being his actions. I oftentimes ask black people to look at black on black crime, and you know what that you know what they tell me? They say, "Oh, well, you're racist, Dr. Jefferson, because we're only killing black people because that's what we're exposed to." That doesn't sound problematic to you? The fact that you could redact, that's your argument against my comment, and that doesn't sound like it's an issue to you. I want you guys to hear that. We only kill what we're exposed to. That's saying that we are taking account of the fact that we have inadequate coping skills as a result to feeling threatened, disturbed, upset. And it says that we're ill equipped to deal with significant said distress because the only thing we know how to do is be aggressive, hostile, to murder. That's it. On the outside looking in, um, I definitely understand your comment. And in so many ways, on a personal level, I definitely agree with you. But on a professional level, if we look at all of these things, attachment injuries are more dangerous than even removing a child from a violent and hostile situation. That's the truth of the matter. That's what the science says. Um, and it's hard. It's a very difficult truth to sit with. But this child has been traumatized and potentially has seen the death of its mother during a very fragile time of attachment. And the only parent caregiver that's directly attached to the emotions of that are now detached from that child is the surviving grandmother, who is the mother of the mother who has been murdered. So, if we're thinking about it in a logical way, as we're looking at the safety of the child, psychosocial conditioning, and the constructs of healing through this tragedy, one would say the safest caregiver placement, adult caregiver, family placement would be mom of mom who's been murdered, um, for a couple of reasons, apparently, during this phase. Child protective services, foster care is not an option because that only causes deeper detriment to the physical safety and physiological and psychological safety of the child during the stage. But um, furthermore, you would have to be able to contract for the safety of the child. So that means sometimes you would put the mom's mom in protective custody and the kid, but if you were to relinquish custody and try to, give custody to the dad's mom, then potentially you risk having that child under a more dangerous situation because, of course, if that's his mother, if that's his family that you place the child with, he's definitely going to have access while out on bond if he makes bond. So that's what factors are at play there. Um, yeah, yeah, it's one that I'm heavily following. There were several meetings on this particular thing as it unfolded earlier today. Um, they're not going to look for, I'm just going to be honest with you, they're not going to look for adult relative care placement simply because of the attachment trauma and potential trauma, exposure trauma says that the safest placement is this woman, period. um and like I said, I felt like some of the assumptions of this grandmother are due to us, how we behave as a culture of people, subculture, if you will, and the way that we ignore these issues. And by our ignoring these issues, it perpetuates the cycle. Oftentimes, we see people in intimate partner violent relationships, and when we're trying to contract for their safety, when we're trying to make sure that those people are okay, the first thing that we do is we make a big fuss of it. And it's like, oh, well, honey, I'll let you know that I'm going to move her out and I'm going to move her here. You're letting them know where you're going to take her. So at the end of the day, if they're in a very violent situation, or if this person is a volatile person or a person who is a loose cannon, you can't account for what they will or won't do. You basically just wrote their death certificate. You got to move with care in these cases. You have to have private conversations when you're absolutely positive that the other person is at work, or go over to the house and have them in person when you know the person is not at the home. That is the perpetuator of the abuse cycle. I think that you have to you have to do your due diligence and ask them, okay, so what are the hours that you feel like he's going to be gone for the longest period of time, or she's going to be gone for the longest period of time, so we can make sure that you're okay. I think that in asking these questions, I think you're gauging when your window of opportunity to have them pack up and go will be, and you want to make sure that you're preparing them appropriately. So that means you go through the necessary steps, and you tell them, okay, well, when you're doing laundry, because this is a really good one. When you're doing laundry, just make sure that you're packing just a little bit to the side, just so you guys have enough of clothes to wear for maybe 1 or 2 days. Let me care about or worry about the other days coming. Have somebody as a backup coming to get all of the things out of the home and to make sure that everything is moved thereafter. But you need to be able to do these things. And then when that person goes and moves through and, gets a protective order that's temporary, that's going to protect them, you have to do your due diligence and make sure that, okay, so to go back to court on this day to follow up to get a continuation for this protective order. In the meantime, let's get you a different address, because protective orders can only be as efficient as the people who have them, okay, in their possession. So if you're advocating for them, if you're trying to help them, make sure that you're also helping them make moves, silent moves in the dark, if you will. And if they need police protection, make sure that you advocate for them. Go to the local police station and ask them, okay, so how do I do this? Or go to your local victims advocate office, because there are a lot of them everywhere. Always be cognizant of where you can get help. The other component is there are a tremendous amount of resources um, on this website here. Let me share it with you guys really quickly. Mm-mm-mm. Where is it? It's called the hotline.org, and they have chat, phone number, and text. If you look at the bottom during this little ticker that's going down during the show, you will see, let me make it bigger, but you'll see that the phone number is already listed here. But if you're a person who prefers to text, please be careful, because if you're the person who needs help, the problem is the other person can definitely see the text chat. If they grab your phone, they look through it. And of course, we know that in most domestic violence situations, that intimate partner violence is a part of the equation. There are no healthy boundaries. If there were healthy boundaries, there would not be intimate partner violence. So, if you're a person who wants to text on the behalf of someone else to try and get help, you want to text start to 88788. And it's not hard to remember. Okay. Um, you can always go to the website, and the website is thehotline.org. THEH. Hold on, I'm gonna put it in the comments because that makes it a lot easier. Okay, let's see. So if you guys are viewing it on Periscope or YouTube, you should be able to see um, the hotline.org typed in the comments. And if you are viewing it on the Facebook feed, you should be able to see it up on the screen. So you want to look at the screen now. We'll leave it up for a little while. But this particular website, I like it simply because, unlike other websites, it gives you the details on how you can be safe about keeping yourself anonymous. If they go to this website, it shows them basically how to delete the search history and all of that good stuff. You said these children need our protection. Being a man, our women don't. Certain women are destroyed. Our children need that safe space, yeah, to help them develop. Um, Yeah. I didn't see the comments for AAS. But so the main thing that I want to point out, let me see. So I work with these cases. Courts are very unforgiving when adults fail to act, especially when a death results. Um, yeah, and the thing is, for anti-Afro sphingalis, I don't know if you're still on, but the what makes these cases so difficult, especially in her mom's case, is um she has a long history of moving her daughter, and these are going to be facts that are presented in the case for her mother to maintain custody, and also for the other family to have restricted and what they call supervised visitation. And it's definitely a good argument, more than a good argument, more than compelling, because she's definitely advocated for her daughter to leave, and there's a history of that, and her mother is the one that funded the move the first time. So it's a lot that goes toward her mom being in the fight for this young lady having a safe place to escape to. Um, but I did. It's just so hard, you know. It's so hard simply because you have a young woman who was just beginning her life, and you have a child who's literally just beginning their conditioning, their personality development, and the mom is now gone. It's just, it's all just, it's disturbing. And I think to not see, to not hear from the family of the young man as to what they've done to try and provide safety for this couple. Um, and I can't find anything. Even when I checked where the young lady got her restraining order, you can see who's in attendance and things like that. He doesn't even have family support for that part. So I'm just curious as to how much his family has been involved from the very beginning of seeing the cycle of violence leading up to here and now. Also, you got to think about it. He's got friends, he's got additional family members and things like that. People talk to people. So if you have friends of yours who are involved in difficult situations and in hostile relationships, you have to do your due diligence. You have to have a conversation with them. You have to be the person to advocate for not only the person's safety that is, in a relationship with them, but also for their safety, their mental and emotional stability. So I think that in the black community, we have a sense of trying to protect the black man because he's a black man, instead of trying to protect the future of the black man because he's a black man. Okay. And hear me when I say that. We have to be people that advocate for the wholeness of our black men. We have to be people that advocate for adequate knowledge of our black men, adequate coping skills, adequate means, providing them what they need, so that they can adopt more pragmatic means of dealing with their distress. Exactly. And it's really sad because attachment trauma is one of the most debilitating traumas known to humanity. That's where all of our personality disorders come from. That's where all of our severe mental illnesses come from. And it's just so many levels to wrong to this. It says, yes, I'm still here. Watch the friends and family will show up and pool money in an effort to bail them out. You know, I doubt it. I do. Take a look at his arrest history. So there were a lot of things that I looked at in kind of vetting this particular story. That's why I say it's this one is definitely on us. as a community of people. This young man was failed by the people who are in his circle. And he's out here on his own for that reason. When you have people who obsess over people in relationships, and I talk about personality disorder, we've talked about personality disorders for quite a few weeks now. When I talk to you guys about mental health issues and the diagnoses and ways that you can recognize some of the symptoms that are in alignment, what I need you to understand is that that doesn't give you, the energy to go out here and be a whole clinician, but it does give you the fuel that it takes for you to identify when a person needs some help. Okay. So you should know when a person is in need, and sometimes they don't know when they're in need. Times that you can do something. And during these times, you've got to say, hey, you need some help. You know what I mean? Like, how can I help? What can I do to help? Or you know what? Why don't we go out? Let's go out and talk about this. Let's go out for coffee. Let's go sit down. I don't care. Like, a lot of you smoke joints and stuff like that. Go sit, let's sit, smoke a joint and have a conversation about how you can go and do something else other than being this relationship or keep chasing this woman. You said, I've seen that they will cry and scream out of guilt in order to get him out on bail. Well, I hope that that works out for him. With the national attention that this particular case has drawn, and all things considered, I would be shocked that if they relinquish the findings of the investigative report that led to finding this mother, if they give that to Jersey, he won't even have a bail. That's what I can guarantee. But I feel like, sometimes you got to have conversations where you're telling people, you know, let's go out and let's find somebody else, let's go look at other women, or let's go to the strip club, look at some other ladies. I don't care. Do something. Do your part. Intervene. Don't let your friends go down like this when you see them in distress. And I know initially you might look on the surface and be like, well, you know what? That ain't nothing. He ain't worried about that. Mm-mm. He got this chick and that chick and this one. And those are just means to distract yourself away from the current issue at hand. Period. Okay. When people really care about people, oftentimes you see them jumping in and out of other people's beds simply because they don't want to have to feel the pain associated with their reality. Oh yeah, yeah, you definitely got to do that, and that's what I encourage people to keep up with cases like this, because these cases oftentimes get lost in the shuffle. Just like I think a lot of people haven't been following up on the George Floyd situation. There are a lot of cases that I break and I discuss on here that people don't follow up with. Okay, but I think you guys should. The other one that I think that you should keep up with is the Las Vegas case where the black mom just, killed her 5-year-old daughter. Hmm. So, and that's a whole other level of wrong. It really is. But so, I think that these cases where our black fathers are left out of the shuffle, blocked out of the lives of their kids, or inaccurately guided and constructed by the people in their systems. I think these are the cases that we really have to grab onto, and we have to reshape the way that we respond to our environment, because these are our young black boys. And we should care enough about ourselves because they're a direct reflection of us and what we're not doing as a community to help them. So I encourage you guys to have the conversation and to realize that this is something that we need. You understand? Said just like missing black children that's been lost, the numbers are still adding up to this day. I agree. I agree. In so many cases, and we just toss them to the side. I feel like we advocate more for our dead black men than we do the ones alive, and that's a problem for me. That is a problem for me, especially when the only dead ones that we advocate for are the ones that are murdered at the hands of police officers. And that's probably 1 million of the ones that are murdered at the hands of us. We've got to do better. We've got to start reshaping the way that we respond to emotional distress. We've got to give better coping mechanisms to people that we care about. We've got to do our due diligence out here. I think that if we look towards improving our personal accountability standards in our community, I think that we could definitely change this and we can move in a positive direction. Cases like this, although we are accountable for the lack of provisions that we provide to our young people and the lack of oversight that we have and things like that, I don't think that we're responsible for them having happening directly, but we're definitely accountable for not putting out the information and being positive about it. If we become people who are only entertained by negativity, and we cannot push positive energy into the atmosphere, and we cannot elevate our black boys and our black girls, if we can't elevate us as a community without having the mentality being conditioned of inferiority complex, there is something wrong with us. There is something truly wrong with us. Like, we have to make a decision that now is the time for us to do something different. And as a result of us making that said decision, we move differently. The answer is not Umar Johnson's answer by creating an all black school that further perpetuates the cycle of inferiority complex. And then we're taking black boys and black girls and deconditioning them from being a part of the collective whole of the entire world. The answer is not to say that there are no hope for black women, Kevin Samuels, or black men, Tanya TKO and Cynthia G. We have to say that there is hope. It's just hard to see it. Now, I ain't going to lie about that one. If we look at things as they are right now, if we look at the things that people have to say right now, if we look at the way that men respond to women and women respond to men right now, yeah, kind of looks a little hopeless. Okay, the disparity is huge. I feel depressed every time I look at arguments between black men and black women, and it's disgusting too because I'm like, who taught you that this was okay? Black women have more concern about what a black man is doing with his penis than black men have concern for what they're doing with their penises. And I think that's a black man issue. Black men have more concern about what black women are doing with their vaginas than black women have concern about what black women are doing with their vaginas. And I say that that's a black woman issue. So I think we have to say black men have to take their knees off the necks of black women, and black women have to take their knees off the necks of black men. And we need to let one another run free, roam free, and be authentic in our experiencing so that we can learn to elevate one another by complimenting one another. You said, Cynthia G, my girl, you too hard on her, Dr. Jefferson. Look, I'm all about accountability. She got to get it right. She does. And I understand that she's hurt. Don't get me wrong. Totally understand that she's hurt. But her maturation level is that of an elementary school child in relation to her response to her being hurt. You can't name call and bully and things like that as a means of dealing with your distress. it makes you borderline narcissistic. And then over a course of time, you start to behave and adopt more of those principles or character traits of a narcissist, and you become it. Look at Kevin Samuels. This was a process for him. We definitely do. But he didn't just get here overnight, you know. Mm-mm. When he first came to these YouTube streets, he was extremely insecure and he wore his insecurity on his shoulders and his face. Stop, but seriously, he didn't just get here overnight, okay? What you doing? Oh, okay, okay. But so, oh, okay, that's cool. But so I feel like we have to do our due diligence. We really do. I think that in coming together, it requires us to first split apart, but split apart without all the drama, okay? And let people be authentically them. If men want to be XYZ, whatever they are, you know, and you guys can call them trash bags, struggle dusties, whatever it works, okay? But you can't expect for, in calling these men's names, for them to come running to kiss your ass. You know what I'm saying? Like, you no. And you can't be saying these things about black men in general, putting them all in this space, and you are a mother of a black male and you've had sex with a black male to gain your children. It's directly conflictual with your own identity. You know what? Let me explain it to you, okay? So let's look at it. Kevin Hart, I mean Kevin Samuels is an actual kind-hearted person somewhere deep down in there. And I'm a person that don't like the guy, but I'm going to give you guys the truth of a narcissist. Deep within him, he is just a very encourageable, moldable, shapeable child who has been hurt several times over. As a result of being hurt several times over, as a result of being denied access to certain crowds and associations, he is a person who definitely needs work but has, gone to extreme lengths to be liked because he's not been liked at those very how do we say, those integral parts of his development. Nobody included him. So for him, it became very important that somebody give him validation. And once he got that validation, whether he found a way to get that validation through putting on a face, right? And he had to sacrifice to put that face on because he couldn't afford that hooker. Okay, he couldn't afford her. Once he found this group that wanted to accept him, and this group finally started to promote him and finally gave him a platform for success. Once he found an outlet in his outrage, and these people came to the table supporting him, he became more and more negative because people like negative content. People, regardless of how much we want to say people are people and people aren't bad people and people evoke positive energy, the natural nature of black people, all of us, is the detriment of ourselves and our detriment of our brothers to promote us, make us look better. We talk about other people in a negative way. That's just what we do. And when we finally own that, we can become better than that. But as long as we keep comparing ourselves to other people and keep thinking that it's okay for us to push other people down in order for us to elevate ourselves up, we will remain down. We will never get anywhere, ever. So even though we see the cruel version of Kevin Samuels today, he's not always been that. Go look at some of these court transcripts of him being in court with the children's moms. Okay. Look at some of his outcomes. Look at his earlier videos, now deleted. But understand that the man has not always been the man that you see before you. Okay. And he still isn't the man that he projects to be. That's the interesting thing. He is not the man that he projects for the rest of the world to see. That is all a facade. And if you guys start paying attention to his body language in some of these interviews, you will learn that, you know what? He ain't who he say he is. But I do think that he is relevant to this conversation because he is a person that constantly perpetuates the cycle of emotional abuse by black men. Men have, says he has a record of child abuse. He does, but to go back to the latter comment, you got to see who he is and who he was. Hurt people when they're in a position to reject. But so the thing is, Kevin Samuels is a hurt person. And he is a person that now is a problem, and he's perpetuating that cycle. But I think that there are other people who try to be very positive, but in some of their ideations, in their trying to be positive, they also perpetuate the cycle of emotional abuse in the black community. Dr. Boyce Watkins is one of those people. Though he's out here giving all this wonderful insight into how to be financially successful and, how to properly move money and things like that, for people who are following him, if you're listening to some of those very basic principles of being a part of that B1, B2 framework and approving of that, I want you to pay a close attention to what he's saying, how he's conditioning you, and how he's moving you. Remember, we're about accountability here. Regardless of how much good you're trying to put out there into the atmosphere, if you're conditioning a black person to believe that by way of you rendering financial knowledge, financial knowledge and, insight, education to them on this platform, you're elevating them so they can be number one in comparison to other races of people, okay, you're not helping. You're not helping. You have to be people who are consistent because the comparison, social comparison theory, leads to the detriment of self. So people cannot identify properly who they're becoming in their journey if they're so busy comparing themselves to other people. They can identify with those other people and where they are on the continuum to becoming those other people that they're comparing themselves with, but they lose sight of self in the process. So you can't become if you're not experiencing fully. So you definitely have to be aware of where you are. And I agree. Can we bring her comment back up? Because I do agree with that part that I saw about, you know, him losing his temper. So I think it says a lot about where he is in his journey and where he is in his own individual development, you know. But I just think that, if you're going to put out positive, information, you're going to be a positive impact to society, you have to be a more tethered person. Same thing for Umar Johnson. I think that we have to be people that recognize that our children deserve more. Our future deserves more. They deserve more than us, even. So we have to put 150% of us out there and make it vulnerable and accessible for them so that they can move into a greater propensity to thrive in situations where they find themselves in high and heavy distress. So whether it's female perpetrators or male perpetrators of violence, they can look just like us. We're all potential perpetrators. All it takes is for us one moment of emotional distress, to flip it, to all out flip it. That's it. We have to get a better gauge of understanding our emotions, becoming one with our emotions, becoming one with ourselves, and understanding the difference between feelings and emotions. When we do that and we accept the fact that we are innately violent in our culture in the way that we deal with emotional distress, we can step into a place where we start to do things differently because we recognize that that's an issue for us. So, victims can look like everybody, perpetrators can look like everybody. Understand that the cycle of violence looks interesting. So, we can't just walk into somebody's situation and see, oh, okay, well, you know what? This person's definitely getting abused today. Mm-hmm. They're getting abused every day. We see it. You can tell. How can you tell? Oftentimes, people who are stuck in the cycle of violence don't show any symptoms because these people are typically silent and subservient because they are fearful of what that other person may or may not do. Intimate partner violence happens in almost every single relationship at some stage. Isn't that crazy? Everybody is going to go through it at some point. The way that you respond to it will teach a person how they can or cannot treat you. Whether you get yourself together after you see these different parts of you presenting in a situation where you're now violent and you normally aren't violent in an intimate partner way, if you respond differently, it will teach your partner that you now care, that you know what, maybe this person doesn't want to hurt me, maybe this person didn't intend to hurt me, maybe this person does want to get help. There are several people that are qualified mental health providers that provide services for people who are domestic violence perpetrators and victims. I'm one of them. Is it a hard job to do? Sometimes. But I think that what makes it more challenging is people who think that they can go along in their relationships, or by getting out of those relationships they found themselves in repeatedly with different people, they can now move into a relationship that is not yielding intimate partner violent behavior. Girl, if you found yourself in the same cycle of abuse, but it was a different person every single time, but you still found yourself in the same relationship again and again and again, the problem isn't them, it's you. It Sometimes we are so accustomed to being abused that we find ourselves in relationships where we can only trigger another person to abuse us because that's the only thing that we see and we recognize and we know is love. That's a truth that I want you guys to take from this conversation and to have conversations around this. How do you recognize the displays of affection that take place in your intimate partner relationships? How are they healthy or unhealthy to the way that you shape behaviors in your relationships and model behaviors for your kids if you have children, for kids who are observing your relationships if you don't have kids? So you said that's why I explained Kevin Samuel's statements was not wrong. He was just displaying ignorance, lack of education, etc. when he said, I haven't seen women being abused. On what show? I probably just haven't seen that one. Did we review that statement? Mm-mm. Yeah, I don't think I've seen that footage, but I can imagine that Kevin Samuels will say something like that, considering all things. But to go back to what you guys can can do to recognize what it looks like when people are being abused. Sometimes it's situations where you just see a pattern of behavior where they find themselves in relationships where these people are constantly being abused, and they call that being the victimization. So playing the victim card is common for people who are actually the abusers of relationship in a relationship emotionally, and as a result they cause a cycle of abuse or physical abuse to be escalated in their relationships. So if you see that, if it's a repetitive cycle, I'm sorry, of people that you know or are familiar with, and they keep finding themselves in relationships, and you know that they're variations of personalities that they're finding themselves in relationships with, but the centralized theme is always that somebody becomes abusive to them. You might want to be helping those people to find adequate resources for therapy or other group supports, victims groups, maybe, so that they can learn more adequate means of communicating with other people, because victims groups do teach those skills. Because essentially, even though they're victimizing other people, they're still a victim of their cycle themselves. And I know it's complex and you guys probably don't understand, but just do that for them, because that's still something that you can do to stop that cycle of abuse from continuing to perpetuate its cycle of behavior. So, and you see that oftentimes when females are not physically as strong as men. And I talked last night in last night's show about the natural, modes of femininity. Women are naturally quite manipulative. Even though men are too, women are able to do it more silently, because that's the way that women are taught, to lure in their men. um, Certain body languages and certain things that you do are supposed to be innate ways for you to communicate with the man without having to just come out and say or approach a guy. But so that goes a step further in some situations where women become so manipulative of men that they're also manipulating them into becoming abusive, into these jealous bouts and things like that. When you notice that there is a cycle of behavior where, they're like, well, you know what? He's always just jealous. The other guy, he was just jealous too. And they just beat me because they're just jealous. And she's always ending up with the bus lip, right? Find her more adequate means to deal and cope with her distress. Find her a therapist. There are a lot of organizations out here that offer pro bono services. My organization is definitely one. We do have scholarships for people who can't afford therapy. There are a ton of other organizations. If you guys go to my Facebook page, I oftentimes connect with clinicians that do the same. Also, I have a host of clinicians that I've trained and facilitated trainings for, who also provide these services in different states. Just get the help that these people need. Do your part. Help our community elevate ourselves, not because we want to be better than other people in our communities, right? Or in our culture of American culture, but because we really want to operate at a higher capacity that says that we are worthy, because we are. You said some novice therapists fall victim to these people. And I'm like, oh, hell no. I addressed that on the spot. These people will try to lure, manipulate, and even abuse therapists rather than do the work. Oh my. If I knew how to pin a comment, that would be it. I totally agree. And it takes some time, and it does take tenure to be able to recognize those patterns, and I'm pretty sure you know that. But it's hard to recognize those patterns when you've been seeing it for so long. The last point that I want to definitely talk to is intimate partner rape culture. This is also a form of intimate partner abuse, and also it's not only just a physical, but it's an emotional and physical abuse that takes place at the same time. And we know that physical abuse causes emotional and physical scars, but intimate partner rape culture is another thing that I feel like in the Black community we really don't talk about. This is what we see if we go all the way back to The Color Purple, right? The Color Purple was a very disturbing movie. It was a very disturbing movie. Though at the time, it was a powerful movie, impactful, if you will. At the time that The Color Purple was released, there were several things in our community that black men were still doing to black women. And as a result, some of these things resonated in a way that it wasn't problematic. It just confirmed where these behaviors came from. Okay. Now, what I did see over the last couple of decades is that people have, black men, I mean, have adopted new ways of resolving issues and approaching permission giving around sex with their intimate partners. But for the vast majority, you see this shift significantly now to the women now raping the men. You just can't make this stuff up. But so I guess you do have to get, things have to get worse before they get better, right? So now that we know that we've gone from one end of the spectrum to a completely opposite end of the spectrum, let's try and level this thing out. Let's, as a community of people, as a subculture of people, let's vie for healthier behaviors around sexual intimacy and relationships. Let's agree to have like a code word for I'm not into sex tonight. Okay. Because apparently men don't know how to recognize when women don't want to be into sex, and women don't know how to recognize when men don't want to be into sex and give that space that's very much needed. Okay. And this is not just a black community issue. This is across the board. And it's not limited to American culture. When I say it's a global issue, it's a global issue. So start respecting the bodies and the intimate space of your partners. Please, please, please. In the absence of a yes, a definite yes, just assume the answer is no. And if the answer is no, that means you don't engage in sex, okay? Oftentimes, when these situations right here arise, where we see the young lady end up dead after her trying to get away from this guy time after time after time, fleeing from place to place to place to live, many times this is what we see. Hey, how are you? This is what we see. It's around sexual intimate partner abuse. And, they go ahead and they have sex with the person. And when they're having forcible sex, sometimes it ends up with the person being dead. And although the death may be an accident, the rape wasn't. Just do better. It boils down to us doing better at emotional distress management and recognizing that there are issues in our relationships that lead us to murderous behavior. And when I say murderous behavior, whenever you put your hands on somebody else's child, okay, I'm going to take it back old school. Whenever you have to put your hands on somebody else's child, just know you out of line. That's pretty much what it boils down to. Awesome, and thank you. I appreciate you. So know that not only are you out of line, but you need to adapt more healthy ways to respond to the anger, the hostility that is inside of you, because these are only secondary feelings to the underlying emotions that you feel. So if you get a little bit more intact with those emotions, you'll find out that you're either hurt or you're overly elated about something. And I'm going to go with hurt, because hurt people tend to hurt people physically, emotionally, verbally, all that good stuff. So when you recognize where that pain is coming from, you can go back and sit with yourself and find more meaningful ways to connect to the people that you feel have caused some level of an indentation in that ripple effect of pain. Have conversations. Like, what's wrong with us just talking it out? Just because you're pissed off doesn't mean that you can't rationalize, okay? So it does take you to calm yourself down first. So I'm going to teach you guys some basic muscle tension release strategies, okay? Just this one. That's it. Oftentimes, people like to do deep breathing techniques, and sometimes that works, but sometimes it doesn't. But I can definitely say the muscle tension related exercises are definitely gratifying because they release more dopamine and oxytocin and norepinephrine from the brain through the bloodstream to the body, right? So let's just do this one. Okay, you're gonna ball up a fist, and I'm gonna hope that your nails aren't long like mine. I kind of let them grow out a bit. But you're gonna ball up a fist, you're gonna hold that fist as tight as you can. And even though, the deep breathing exercise also include counting, and this is one that includes counting, and I don't necessarily encourage counting as a means to, resolve the stress, it does help because then you know how long you've had that fist balled up. So you're gonna hold that fist really tight, and it's gonna be balled up and remain balled it up. The first balled it, right? Balled up for about 15 seconds. You're gonna count to 15 or from 15 to 1. Okay. And then at the end of the 15 seconds, you're going to release it fast for about 2 to 3 seconds. Once you notice the feeling that you feel on the inside of your palm, you're going to do it again. You're going to hold it tight and count down from 15 to 1, 15 seconds. And at the 1, you're going to release again. What you're going to notice is if you incorporate two fists, honey, you're ready to rationalize now because you don't have to do anything with these fists. You feel compelled to do something with them. So the moment you balled your fist up, and this is all going to make sense for you guys as to why intimate partner violence happens in the first place. The moment you balled your fist up, you start to feel a little bit of a cathartic release because that's the way your brain works. Your brain doesn't know that you're not abusing this person. Okay? It doesn't, has no idea. Your brain thinks that, oh, it's about to go down, right? That's what your brain is thinking. And because it's thinking it's about to go down, it's thinking we're about to reach the point to where we can get some solutions to what's going on here because we need some solutions. As soon as you release, it's thinking that you've already punched that person. That's the first punch because when you release, you're releasing, you moving forward the arm anyway. And so when you're doing that, it makes it look like you just punched somebody. The angrier you are, the more effective that first pump is. So the more times you do this, if you do it 3 times, a total of just 3 times, and you do it with just one hand, you'll notice that you're in a whole different place. Another thing is smiling, believe it or not. Smiling, the smile muscles in your face help you to increase dopamine and oxytocin levels and serotonin levels as well. I mean, drastically. Like nobody's business. So be pissed off and then tell yourself, you know what, it's gonna be all right. Those awkward, nervous smiles, but it's still a smile nonetheless, okay? And that self talk, positive self talk, talk yourself down and tell yourself it's gonna be all right. It's not even that serious. You're not worth it. I'm worthy. I'm not going to jail tonight. Jail is terrible. It's smelly. That slab is cold. Start thinking about your outcomes, okay? As a result, come to a place to where now you can actually move into a conversation about how you can resolve the conflict without the murderous intentions, right? Don't murder anybody. Don't do that. Don't do that because you think jail is bad. Wait till you get to prison and you can't eat what you want, go where you want, dress how you want, do what you want. You understand what I'm saying? Sleep when you want, wake when you want, garden when you want or not, move where you want, live where you want. It's a lot of things. You're losing a lot. Think about the things that you stand to lose for just that 1 minute of gratification that's not even gratification. Okay. So I hope that I've given you guys healthy means to recognize, intervene, help somebody who needs help that's in an intimate partner violent relationship. Awesome. Thanks, Candy Girl. I I hope that this has resonated with somebody. Go out there and do your part. Help our young Black people. Like, if we don't do it, nobody else will. If we don't care, no one else will. If we do not do our part, our future is obsolete. The piece that we've not really followed or looked at is that, okay, let's just say, Black people love comparing cultures, okay? We love talking about that, but we don't talk about how we're the problem in that part. So let's just say this young boy, this young man, he is our legacy. The son of these two people is our legacy. His mother was a white woman, but his father was a Black man. He's a young Black boy. He'd be now a young Black boy no longer. He's going to be raised in a white culture. He would definitely improve his odds, maybe go to college and things like that, because he's maybe going to be raised in a culture that knows how to properly handle distress. Who knows? Or in a culture that doesn't respond to the murderous nature of them, as we're killing what we see around us. But the negative component here is that we lose an opportunity to identify and further our lineage, our legacy as Black people, to that same culture that we find ourselves every single day in competition with. We got to do something different. Make it make sense for me, people. Get caught up in the moment. You should teach these techniques in school. You know what? I do here in Atlanta. But I think I'm gonna make it a bigger thing. I think I'm gonna start traveling more often. Well, Atlanta and Seattle, Washington. Um, yeah, I think I'm gonna make it a bigger initiative and start to include more clinicians, because I do trainings for a tremendous amount of clinicians at this point, and my university is growing, and I feel like, if not for nothing else, we could definitely put this on the agenda. We could definitely do that. So I appreciate that suggestion. So go forth, be great, do great things, and make your impact in this world around us. Hold those people accountable when they need to be held accountable. Start having accountability conversations around these things that affect our community. If you guys have topic suggestions, you know where to send them, you know where to find me. If you have people that you feel like are a part of your network or a part of the people that you follow, social media content creators and things like that, that you think I should take a look at their work, send me their work. If you feel like people need who are in your community need to be held accountable, send me the info, and I will definitely reach out and try to initiate those conversations. I am here to have the difficult conversations that oftentimes we as Black and brown people are remiss to approach, simply because we're afraid of what that may mean when we look back in that reflective mirror as to how it is that we have a role to play in some of these outcomes. Okay. So I'm here for the accountability conversations. Do help. Thank you for going back and rewinding and replaying this video, Candy Girl. And thank you for sharing as well. If you guys are new to this platform, remember to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, whatever you do on YouTube, because I'm trying to expand here, but I'm not quite sure as to how you do that. But yeah, it's been great. Shout out to the chat, because you guys are great as always. And I hope that you guys have an amazing and a magnificent rest of your Monday for the last 13 minutes or so. That's all I've got. Later days, folks. Bye.
Who alive can't put me in a box. I redefine any definition you got. I am the tiger, I'm making steps to the top. The flames, I'll rip it up, you just gotta hand me the rock. Take a seat, you cannot stand it. All I know, the flow harder than a Scotch bunny. Don't try studying me, you cannot manage. This ain't what you want, bitch, I'm a fucking phenomenon. what you want, bitch, I'm a fucking phenomenon. Say what you want, bitch, I'm a fucking phenomenon.